Hi, my name is Mark Crawley and welcome to Diversity Connect. Today we are going to talk about speculative applications. Now, even as I was building this webinar, I started to think, you know what, we're probably going to need a follow-up on this about different types of speculative applications and how you can, I suppose, try to create extra opportunities in your job search. I think, look, talking honestly, when we start to go through this, you'll see that this is not for everyone. Right, it's not something that everyone finds sort of straightforward to do, and it can sometimes cause a bit of anxiety and rejection or RSD, etc. So it is important to sort of take this, again, like anything with Diversita, to connect as an option, right? Something we're presenting as an option which may work for some people. I think sometimes it's difficult for me because I worked in sales for so long. I sometimes feel that this is second nature to everyone, and then obviously you combine in neurodiversity and neurotypes into this as well. It can sometimes be a little bit more of an obstacle for people than I maybe let on, right? So anyway, speculative applications. Let's go through them, and what I'm going to do is give almost a working example, and it's sort of pretty similar to something we've shown about a year and a half ago with relation to identifying neuro-inclusive companies. So let's get on. With regard to what are speculative applications, ultimately, the way I see it really is you are approaching organizations or approaching companies with an application, be it a CV or a letter or something that you're presenting your skills and yourself on when there's no job advertised. So because of that, it might mean there's no formal application process. Now, some organizations have like talent pools. So if you look at someone like Auticom, you can add yourself to their talent pools, and a few companies do have this where you can literally just send your CV and you sort of almost go onto their CRM, and then they'll let you know about opportunities. So that can work. But what we're talking about really today is when there's no job or no job that you feel you're interested in is advertised. Now, the good thing about this and doing this is it just opens up this new world of possibilities, because now you can proactively approach companies that you'd like to work for. So if you look at the Diversita job board, right, it's very new. We made it company driven. So and what I mean by that is you have an organization, we present a page, we talk about the type of work they've done about neuro-inclusivity to give our community more reassurance, but they may not have jobs that are relevant for you right now. But it doesn't mean that you can't send them a CV. It doesn't mean that you can't find a point of contact and just give it a go. Right? There's no rules around this, right? And I think that's one of the takeaways today, that it's not as restrictive sometimes as you think. Now, obviously, you do sometimes. It might be difficult, particularly if someone says, "Look, don't send me something directly," or someone comes back with something a little bit negative, or says, "Look, we don't take applications in that way." There's always that chance, right? And I think this is where this is what we'll talk about today. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make it as tailored as possible, and particularly for neurodivergent job seekers. So obviously what we're doing, we're working on the basis that there may not be a role, but you want to work for the company. So this message is often sent via email or LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn is very powerful. Obviously, it's a very accepted way of connecting in a professional sense with other people. So it's a great way of sending a message to an organization to see if they're looking for people. And I want it noted that you don't always have to send a CV, right? It's not always about sending your CV. It's sometimes about presenting and introducing yourself and asking about opportunities. And we used to have a saying when I worked in recruitment that once a job had been advertised, it was almost too late, right? And now it's not always the case, and I don't want everyone to take that as gospel, but the point is it was always better to be on the front foot with regard to jobs coming out and opportunities coming out, because there's processes. So internally at companies, a manager will probably go to HR and say, "Look, I need someone," and that can take a while, etc. So maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the job actually comes out as an advert. Now, if your message lands somewhere in between those 2 points, you've got an opportunity at maybe getting your CV seen a little bit sooner, or maybe getting yourself slightly ahead of the queue. So it's also a good way of trying to create an opportunity and increasing your network. So obviously creating opportunities is great in a tight market, and sometimes being a bit creative can help. And we'll show you an example of how we can do that in a moment. But I think the good thing about this is you can also increase your network. You'll suddenly have a lot of connections that work in talent acquisition probably, or points of contact to organizations where you feel they're relevant to your skill set. So for example, if you want to work for Vodafone and there's someone who's the head of data analysis and you're in data analysis yourself, just connect with the head of data analysis, right? You'll see emails come up, you'll see occasionally messages come up. It's a good person to have in your network. And again, these tiny wins or these tiny steps can sometimes help, and particularly helping when you're sending speculative applications. Because as you'll know on LinkedIn, if you're connected with someone, you can send them a message with as many characters and attachments as you want, right? You have to use it sparingly, of course, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it's important. Now, obviously, I've touched on this already, but this can be daunting, right, if you haven't done it before. And I think it's always good to sort of start slowly with this, right? And again, we'll walk you through steps on maybe how to do your first one, but it is important that you do take this slowly. It's also an opportunity to be very tailored, though. But because of that tailoring, because of the fact that sometimes you're looking for something relatively niche, this can be a bit of a slow burn. It can be, for example, that someone comes back to you and says, look, we haven't got anything at the moment, but we may have in the future. Well, straight away, you've increased your network, you've introduced yourself to that person, and you've got a slight window there to go back to someone. And again, we can talk about that as and when. But again, this is almost like what we're trying to do here is just create different opportunities, right? And we're looking to try and be a bit creative in a tight market. But we're also looking to make sure, particularly from a neuro-inclusive perspective, that you're approaching people that share your passion for neurodiversity or have shown visibility of embracing neurodivergent job seekers. So let's go through a bit of a working example, because I realise I'm probably covering quite a lot quite early on here. But ultimately, the idea here really is this is a potential option. So here's an example of how to speculatively approach an organisation. And this is not the only way of doing it, of course, right? There's other ways of doing it, and I'm always happy to do future webinars on different ways of approaching. But this is a really, I think, a good opportunity and a good use of time when we're looking for applications. So, for example, if there's an organisation that you want to work for, there's a few things that I would do, right? And we're going to use Deutsche Bank as an example today. But there's a few other examples on the right-hand side now. But what you can do is, say, for example, you desperately want to work for Deutsche Bank. Right, you've seen some stuff in the press, or you've heard about them, you think they're a good organization. So look, let's build up something on how we can build a speculative application. So the first thing we do is search neurodiversity in the company name, look for any neurodiversity recruitment initiatives, look for any senior leadership employee disclosure, careers pages and job specifications, anything you can use there, LinkedIn and social media messaging, Glassdoor and employee feedback, and neurodiversity employee resource groups, or ERGs, right? So all of these things I would be looking for, and I'll show you how to utilize these in your speculative reach out or speculative application in a second. But all of these, I would say, are good indicators, not perfect, but good indicators around neuro-inclusivity. And what we're going to do with this speculative application is just to make sure we're tailoring it as much as possible, to make sure that these organizations understand why you're approaching them, but also how relevant you are to opportunities if they do have them, right? So if we look at this one here with Deutsche Bank, right? So with Deutsche Bank, we would literally Google or use an alternative search engine, Deutsche Bank and neurodiversity. We would then look at sort of checking anything specific around neurodiversity, and we've touched on a few subjects on the previous screen. We touched around senior members of staff that I mentioned. This is always really important. If someone in an organization is in a very senior position and they are talking about neuro-inclusion at a high level, then it's a good subject to latch on to. Do they have a dedicated ERG or employee resource group? And is there any information on the recruitment page? So let's have a look at the type of information we find with Deutsche Bank. So let's so if we Google Deutsche Bank and neurodiversity, now this is a little bit outdated, this example, but it'd be interesting to see if all of these still come up. So someone like Hannah Longman comes up straight away. And I know Hannah, and again, she does certainly did focus a lot on neuro-inclusion at Deutsche Bank. You can see Deutsche Bank have been involved in a government initiative to support neurodivergent job seekers. They do have something called DB Enable, which is an ERG, but it's also, as I did a little bit more research, it's almost like an initiative to support neurodivergent job seekers. So we'll touch on why that's important in a sec. And they do seem to have done some work on wellness areas and quiet rooms. But what you've seen ultimately is you've got 4, I would say, pieces of information there that give you a reasonably good indication that Deutsche Bank within the UK are trying to be a bit more neuro-inclusive. And it's worth noting, right, that these organisations are massive, and I've been doing this for over 4 years now, 4.5 years, and I've never met a fully neuro-inclusive organisation, right? But there are neuro-inclusive teams, and this is why trying to find senior leadership and any pockets within these companies can be useful, particularly when we're approaching them speculatively. So, so we've got loads of info here that we've clicked on the links and we found out a bit more. So you can see here they've got this in autistic employment review event. So I actually went to this event, and so it was hosted by a guy called Alex Wilson, who was an MD at Deutsche Bank, and it was presenting the Buckland report. And the Buckland report for autism employment, you can search and find online. We've done a review of it on Diversity Connect. You can have a check. And they have got a network, and they talk a little bit about when it was brought together in 2022. It may be see, DB Enable, the name tends to get used in different monikers at Deutsche Bank. It seems to be used for their employee resource group, but it's also used, as I say, for the hiring or employment initiative that they certainly had up to a couple of years ago. And then you've got a post from Deutsche Bank talking about Global Neurodiversity Celebration Month, and this was sort of the early part of last year. So this is an example, right? So don't sort of latch on to Deutsche Bank as being a fully neuro-inclusive current organisation. I think this is the type of process that, again, you will do when you find an organisation that you'd like to approach speculatively. So in terms of staff, you can see here a little bit of information about Hannah Longman. Hannah is autistic herself, and really does drive, or certainly did drive, neurodiversity initiatives internally. Then you see a CTO, or sorry, a Chief Technology Officer, someone very similar, called Bernd Lukert. I'll probably pronounce that name terribly, but again, posts around neurodiversity. But you can see in a very, very senior position. That was a while ago, of course, but it's important, again, to try and latch onto this, particularly any senior people within the team. And again, when we show the working example, we'll show you as to why. Another thing to look at is about the ERG and a little bit more information. So you can see that they've won Best Employee Network or Resource Group. It's relatively new, but they seem to have made some good momentum, which is great. And again, this is information that when you're doing a speculative application, you can utilize in your message. And I think, again, this is really important. And of course, right, is there any information on the recruitment page? Now, we mentioned DB Enable. So this is ideally, and it says here, designed for students who are in the penultimate year of study, and it's almost like an open network or graduates to apply. Now, I'll be honest, in this example, this is obviously not going to be relevant for everyone, and I fully understand that. But some organisations will just have an open application process. Others obviously have ring-fenced programs like the BBC with BBC Extend, but it's worth just looking at all of these type of initiatives, and any windows where you have a legitimate open requirement to send a speculative application is normally a good idea. However, That said, in this instance, this is a little bit restrictive, but it may be relevant for some people. I suppose ultimately what we're looking to try to see here is, it is, even if, and I know it says it on here that it's open to students, I would still be sending my CV, right, to Deutsche Bank, almost pleading a little bit of ignorance and just getting your application in there and seeing where it goes and rolling your dice with that, right? So look, that may not be for everyone, but I understand that. But I'm always about pushing the boundaries around neuro-inclusion and seeing what we can do with companies to get them to step up in certain instances. Right? So that may be an option, but of course, a corresponding initiative at another organisation may be useful. So let's have a look at a message, right, that we could send. So in this instance, and you can send this obviously via LinkedIn or via email if you've got the person's email address. This is the type of application that you could send, right? So dear, and you find a contact name and someone you want to send it to. I'm applying for the DB Enable program, and I believe I have the relevant skills, motivations, etc. I'm neurodivergent and was so pleased to see the great work Deutsche Bank are doing in neuro-inclusion. It was inspiring to see that you have a dedicated neurodiversity ERG and employees such as Hannah Longman leading the way. It's always a difficult decision for any neurodivergent individual to disclose, but after reading that Deutsche Bank are supporting government initiatives to change employment prospects for job seekers, I felt comfortable to do so. It's also refreshing to see senior leaders at Deutsche Bank, such as Bernd Luckhardt, discuss the importance of neuro-inclusion. So what you've got here, you've taken all of this information that you found about your target organisation, and you've built it into something where you're sending a message for the right reasons. Now, obviously, you can start to replace these. I'm applying for any suitable roles in data analysis at Vodafone. I'm applying for any opportunities you may have open for the moment for part-time work at Tesco's. I'm applying, whatever you want to do, right? And then you start to build the message based around your other research. I'm neurodivergent and so pleased to see the great work Tesco's are doing with neuro-inclusion. They have autism shopping hours in the mornings, etc., etc. Whatever you want to put in there. But you're building this message up and you're approaching it with a very, very good reason for applying to the companies. And it would take, I think, a particularly, stringent decision maker or an organization not to reply to this, particularly if you're building a sort of a portfolio of evidence around this. Now, of course, like you can use AI tools to do this now. So if you put in into a Gemini or a Copilot or a Claude or something like that, can you show me any visibility of neurodiversity initiatives in the UK that BMW have been showing? Then it might show you them, right? And then you can use those to build your message and build your the application. But ultimately, what you're doing here, this isn't necessarily related to a role. And I think this is the important part, that if it's not related to a role and it is a speculative application, you have to try to create a hook on there. And the hook in this instance is your research. The hook in this instance is that you are neurodivergent. The hook in this instance is that they embrace, certainly on the surface, neurodivergent candidates to apply. So give this a go, right? I'd love to hear your feedback on how it goes. If there's a particular company that you find that you want me to do a sort of a quick search on and send you some points to help you build your message, I'm happy to do that. If you have a message, the first one that you want me to check, send it across to me as a DM. Happy to have a look, because this could really, really help. And it feels like a proactive way of trying to generate some interest. So thank you so much for watching this webinar or listening to this podcast today. We hope it's been useful. We really do. We'll catch up about this on our next monthly meetup and see how many wins we've had or how many messages have gone out or anything like that. But this is, I say, it's a good way of just trying to generate a little bit of interest. And you know what? It's a bit of a sandbox, right? You can, there's no real rules around this to a degree. And more importantly, you can approach companies that you want to approach. Now, they're not always going to have jobs, right? They're not always going to be able to help you, but it gives you a little bit more control rather than waiting for a suitable role and that role having hundreds of applications and you getting lost in the noise. This gives you an opportunity to try to create a personalized conversation with someone within an organization. So give it a go. We've had some success on it, and certainly when we was operating as a recruitment agency in the past, but love to hear your feedback. But thank you so much for watching or listening today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to presenting more tips and help on our next webinar or podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe, and scan the QR code to join the Diversa Connect community.